ali do lado de fora, para você deixa lá um documento seu, para que a gente possa, todos tenham acesso à nossa tradução. Ali na entrada, é isso. Bom, como a gente sabe, o desafio de São Paulo de chegar aqui às 19 horas, mas eu queria convidar a vocês, se você estiver mais no fundo, se puder vir mais para cá. E como o nosso tema é acolhimento, eu queria que você já aproveitasse aí e fizesse um exercício aí. Como a gente não tem como dizer bem-vindo para todo mundo de maneira acolhedora, você pode fazer esse favor? Faz isso aí para a pessoa que está do seu lado aí. Seja muito bem-vindo. Vamos juntos aprender a ser ainda mais acolhedores, né? Antes de iniciarmos a programação, eu quero convidar você a fazer alguns testes com relação ao seu fone. Então, o primeiro teste é, se você não tem, você precisa pegar um fone lá fora, né? Você vai deixar lá um documentozinho para você acompanhar, a não ser que você queira treinar aí o seu inglês, tá? Então, a primeira coisa, eu queria que você usasse o fone agora, para que a gente testasse. Se tiver qualquer chiado, qualquer coisinha, a gente tem como trocar. Eu vou pedir para o rapaz que está lá na tradução, como é o nome dele, Samuel? O rapaz que está na tradução? O Gabriel. Gabriel, já começamos a agradecer a você, para que a gente possa entender. Gabriel, se você está me ouvindo aí, dá um alô, dá um boas-vindas para a turma aí. Eu vou ver se eu estou te ouvindo aqui também, espera aí. Gabriel, você está me ouvindo? Ei. Perfeito, Gabriel, obrigado. Se você, nesse momento, não está ouvindo a voz do Gabriel, perfeito. Se você não está ouvindo a voz do Gabriel, não é Gabriel anjo, é o Gabriel que está lá traduzindo. Se você não está ouvindo a voz dele, eu vou pedir... eu vou pedir que você vá lá na mesa e troque. Se tem qualquer chiado, qualquer circunstância aí, você pode trocar também. Todo mundo que está aqui está ouvindo o Gabriel aí? Perfeito. Excelente. Obrigado, Gabriel. Nós estamos chamando então o pessoal que está no cafezinho lá também. Estamos nesse dia muito especial. Dentro de poucos minutos nós vamos apresentar o nosso palestrante da noite, que vai compartilhar algo muito especial conosco. Mas eu queria então chamar aqui o pastor Ivener. Nós somos aqui da Batista, Povo, quem não é da casa, para você conhecer um pouco mais, eu sou o gestor aqui da Igreja Batista, Povo, mas queria chamar aqui o pastor Ivener para que ele possa fazer o início aqui com uma oração e nós depois continuamos com as demais informações.
A graça e a paz, queridos. Todos são muito bem-vindos aqui no nosso meio. Sinta-se em casa. E o desejo do nosso coração é que este tempo seja um tempo de edificação, seja um tempo abençoador na sua vida e que Deus cumpra o propósito que Ele tem para estarmos aqui, porque com certeza Deus quer usar a vida de cada um de nós, onde nós estamos, para a glória dEle. Amém? Então, que Deus abençoe muito você, a casa é sua, sinta-se em casa aqui no nosso meio. Tá bom? Pai, nós louvamos ao Senhor por este tempo, nós louvamos ao Senhor por esta oportunidade de estarmos aqui. Nós estamos aqui com os nossos corações desejosos em aprender mais do Senhor, ó Pai. Tu és um Deus de amor, de graça, de misericórdia. Tu és o Deus que sempre tem algo a derramar sobre as nossas vidas e os nossos corações. E nós pedimos ao Senhor, derrame sobre nós a porção que o Senhor tem para as nossas vidas nessa noite. Venha trazer a edificação, o encorajamento, a exortação necessária, Senhor Deus, para que possamos ver a nossa cidade, que precisa tanto, Senhor, a nossa cidade sendo transformada pelo Senhor. Eu não sei como está cada coração, cada vida. Talvez alguém está aqui, mas com seu coração aflito, necessitado, Senhor Deus, de um alento do Senhor. Pedimos ao Senhor que cada coração aqui seja alcançado pelo Senhor e que tenhamos aqui, Senhor Deus, neste momento, um momento precioso de ouvir a Tua voz e sermos transformados por Ti, em nome de Jesus. Amém, 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 querido. Que tal, eu não sou muito de pedir, falar assim, vira a pessoa que está ao seu lado, mas que tal você falar para essa pessoa que está ao lado, que bom que você está aqui.
Vivemos dias em que liderar parece cada vez mais solitário. Ambientes escuros, pessoas feridas, sonhos esquecidos. A missão continua, mas o caminho parece árido. E se o que está faltando não for apenas estratégia, mas um novo tipo de líder? Alguém que saiba criar ambientes onde pessoas e sonhos possam florescer. Alguém que entenda que liderar não é dominar, mas sim acolher. O líder acolhedor de Terry Smith apresenta 5 princípios para transformar a sua liderança com hospitalidade, propósito e impacto. Organizado em 5 sessões chamadas Boas-Vindas, o livro oferece uma abordagem relacional e espiritual sobre liderança. Em cada capítulo, você encontra estudos de casos reais, reflexões bíblicas e notas práticas no tópico Liderança para Casa, com aplicações diretas para a sua equipe, sua igreja ou seu lar. Essa é uma liderança que gera frutos, que cura ambientes, que resgata propósitos, que convida pessoas para a mesa e os guia rumo à realização dos seus sonhos. O líder acolhedor é tudo o que você precisa para se tornar o tipo de líder que o mundo está procurando e que as pessoas desejam seguir. Já disponível na editora Central Gospel.
E hoje nós vamos ter a oportunidade de ouvir diretamente do autor, um dia muito especial. Antes de começarmos, eu queria só então, para que a gente se conhecesse um pouquinho melhor, nós vamos colocar na tela agora uma pergunta do Mentimeter. Quem ainda não está atualizado isso, vai aparecer um QR Code, você vai lá usar o seu celular e a gente vai fazer uma pergunta a você, para que a gente possa se situar. E nós vamos fazer 2 perguntinhas, só para a gente aquecer aqui. Então, eu vou sair da frente aqui, você vai direcionar ali, você, ao conectar depois, a gente vai mudar de tela, e aí nós vamos para a primeira pergunta. É isso mesmo, né, Samuel? Então, vamos lá. Os joinhas ali indicam que vocês estão entrando. Ok? Então, vamos para a pergunta. A pergunta é a seguinte: qual a sua principal área de atuação e influência? Ok, faltam 10 pessoas ali, 5. Ok, bacana. Então, agora nós vamos para a próxima pergunta, e minha dúvida é você já consegue pôr a próxima ou eles precisam entrar novamente? Bom, ok. Então vamos para a próxima pergunta. E a próxima pergunta é: você se considera um líder acolhedor? E aí você pode responder sim, não, ou não tenho certeza, e exatamente por esse motivo a lei que eu estou aqui hoje, tá? Então você tem 3 aí opções, se você se vê como líder acolhedor, se não, ou se você não tem certeza, e aí você quer ouvir do Terry aqui, se você é esse líder acolhedor ou não, tá? Então, essa aqui, ainda faltam pessoas para votar. Eu vou fazer essa pergunta no final, tá? Porque eu comentei com o Terry que é o seguinte: eu achava que eu era. Eu não estou dizendo que é o seu caso, não, estou dizendo que é o meu. Depois que eu li o livro, eu falei, não é bem assim, né? Eu acho que a gente já tem ainda espaço para poder aprender. Bom, então nós temos hoje a alegria de receber o reverendo Terry Smith. E ele é autor do livro O Líder Acolhedor, criando ambientes onde as pessoas e sonhos florescem. Ele é pastor titular da Igreja Life Christian Church em New Jersey, uma comunidade não denominacional com sede na região metropolitana de Nova York, onde ele lidera há mais de 3 décadas. Ele também é cofundador do New York City Leadership Center, que hoje é conhecido como Movement Org, e é conhecido como comunicador, mentor de liderança com formação em gestão e liderança organizacional, e autor do livro que nós vamos ter a alegria de, a honra de ter o lançamento aqui. E você vai ver que entre as pessoas que validam o livro, um deles é o próprio Jack Welch, também considerado um líder aí na área de negócios. Então, eu queria pedir a ajuda de vocês para que a gente possa receber de maneira bem acolhedora, bem brasileira, Reverendo Terry Smith.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you here in Sao Paulo. If I even say the name of this beautiful city correctly, it's such a privilege for me to be here. And it's interesting as you ask the question, are you a hospitable leader? There are so many hospitable leaders in the room, I may not even need to teach tonight. The way that I would have answered the question personally is, I am learning how to be a hospitable leader, which ultimately is to learn to lead more the way that Jesus Christ did, as we'll get into here in just a few minutes. Let me just say a great big thank you to Senior Pastor Vanner. Thank you so much for your hospitality for LA and for all the pastors and leaders of this church. What a beautiful place this is, and what an honor it is for me to be here with you today. And also my friend Pastor Samuel, who's orchestrated a number of events this week and who invited me to come and be here this week. I'm just really, really grateful to be here. And my wife and I, my wife Sharon, who is sitting in the back. In fact, Sharon, if you would, please, would you just stand so people can see that I'm married to a really beautiful woman? Thank you. She didn't stand for long. But my wife Sharon and I are in Brazil for the very first time. And we're just enjoying it so very much. We spent 12 days in Rio over the last couple of weeks, and then we've been here in Sao Paulo for a couple of days. We found Rio to be stunningly beautiful. The fact is, we like Sao Paulo more. There's something about this city that's really special, that resonates with us. I'm very sincere when I say that. Something about this city reminds me of New York City for some reason, which we live in a suburb of New York City and have for some 33 years. The church that we serve and have served for 33 years has a number of Brazilians in it. And so we have a lot of Brazilian friends. And in fact, we have friends from our church who are going to be here this Sunday in the church that I'm speaking at in Sao Paulo. I'm trying to get them to come to church more in New Jersey, but I come to Sao Paulo, and they're coming all the way to Sao Paulo to be in church with us. So we're enjoying being around all of you beautiful Brazilian people, and really consider it to be a privilege to be here with you. So I want to jump right into the teaching, if that's okay. I know that you came to hear a little bit about hospitable leadership. My understanding is that I'm going to speak for about 40 minutes for the first session. We're going to take a break, and then I'm going to do another session. The first session, I'll really just be doing an introduction around hospitable leadership, kind of giving you a sense of what we mean when we talk about hospitable leadership. And then in the second session, I'll expand on one of the big ideas in hospitable leadership, which is about being hospitable to people's dreams. So several years ago, I wrote this book called The Hospitable Leader, how to help people, how to create, I forgot what the name of the book is. It's The Hospitable Leader, how to create environments where people and dreams flourish. And it so happens that sometime after I wrote it, my publisher sent me a letter from a Portuguese publisher, asking if they could purchase the rights to the book to publish it in Portuguese. And of course, my publisher went through whatever they went through to make that happen. I really didn't think very much about it. And then when Pastor Samuel asked me to be here this week, I discovered that the publisher is actually releasing the book this week. Tonight is the first night that I've actually started seeing the book and signing the book, and so it's very exciting for me, and I hope that it will be very meaningful to all of you as well. This book is a deep dive into the hospitable leadership practices of Jesus and an attempt to explain the organizational culture in the church that I serve as lead pastor, the Life Christian Church in West Orange, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. By God's grace, we've grown a very diverse and a large congregation there over many years. And we've done this in a place that's not well known for its hospitality. The New Jersey metropolitan area is not famous for its hospitality. In fact, it's kind of more known for people being straightforward and rude and abrupt and impolite and sometimes even crass. But we've been able, through the practice of hospitality in a variety of ways, as I'll describe, to grow this church in that place, an inhospitable place. And this is what I'm going to talk about here for a little bit. There are 5 welcomes in hospitable leadership, 5 welcomes that the book is written around. The first is home. It's about how to create an environment that feels like home to the people that you're leading, a place where their hearts are warm, because it's easier to lead people when they have warm hearts. A leader can create an environment that warms people's hearts. The second welcome is called strangers. And this is where I talk about how that we are called in Scripture to love people who are not like us and to see the angel in every stranger. The third welcome is called dreams. And this is where I write about how that great leaders are hospitable to people and their dreams. A great leader gets up every day to help the dreams of those that follow them come true. The fourth welcome is communication. And this is where we talk about how to communicate truth graciously. A hospitable leader never compromises truth, but you have to figure out how to communicate truth in a way where people can hear it, whether that's truth, small t, which may be giving feedback to a direct report in your business, or whether that's communicating truth, large T, which has to do with sharing the good news about Jesus Christ. We have to learn how to create environments where truth can be communicated. And then fifth and finally, the fifth welcome is feast. I like to talk about how that Jesus described his leadership domain one time by talking about his kingdom being like a feast that a king threw for his son. And a hospitable leader learns how to create an environment in their leadership sphere that feels like a feast to their followers. And so those are the 5 welcomes of hospitable leadership. What is a hospitable leader? Here is my definition. A hospitable leader creates environments of welcome where moral leadership can more effectively influence an ever-expanding diversity of people. Now let me take a moment and say that a little slower. It's a mouthful. A hospitable leader creates environments of welcome where moral leadership, now there are all kinds of leaders, but a hospitable leader practices moral leadership, meaning that they lead people in healthy ways to healthy places. And so a hospitable leader practices moral leadership. They create environments of welcome where moral leadership can more effectively influence an ever-expanding diversity of people. Every part of that is very important, including and ever-expanding diversity of people. All kinds of people want to hang out in the environment that a hospitable leader creates. Jesus is my model of a hospitable leader. He was the ultimate hospitable leader. In the hospitable leader, I try to look at Jesus from a pure leadership perspective. He was inarguably the single most effective leader in the history of the world. If you just study him from a pure leadership perspective, he is without a doubt the most effective leader in the history of the world. He started a movement with a handful of people that continues 2,000 years later. And his leadership method was rooted in hospitality. Jesus fulfilled his mission in the context of hospitality. When he talked about why he came, he said, Luke chapter 19, verse 10, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. In another place he said, Mark chapter 10, verse 45, that he came to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. This speaks to why he came. But when he spoke about how he came, he only spoke about how he came one time. And he said, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. So the why is he came to, redeem the world. But the how is he came eating and drinking. And it would stun you to note how many times Jesus performed ministry or exercised influence or led people to some good end in a hospitable context. That could be the introduction of his mission at the wedding of Cana, where he caused there to be more wine to keep the wedding feast happening longer. It could be the frequent attendance at dinner parties that you see in the ministry of Jesus. He's constantly hanging out with societal leaders and societal outcasts and all kinds of people in between at dinner parties. We'll talk here in a little bit about the Last Supper and how that at the Last Supper, a dinner, Jesus exercised leadership in profound ways. His post-resurrection reconciliation with Peter happened at a breakfast that Jesus prepared for his disciples. Or we can talk about the fact that the age to come is going to be launched with a tremendous wedding feast. We could go on and on and on and on and talk about examples like this where Jesus either used some hospitable context, like a dinner he was invited to, or he created some hospitable context, like feeding 5,000 hungry people, where he then announced a great spiritual truth, where he described himself as the bread of life. He used hospitable context, or he created hospitable context in which to exercise leadership again and again. Hospitable leadership, though, isn't just about or primarily about physical feasting. We must see the table as a metaphor for creating hospitable environments. It is about creating environments of welcome, physically, spiritually, emotionally, attitudinally, and communicatively, where people's hearts are warmed and where people are therefore more willing to be led. Jesus practiced this in a really multi-dimensioned way at the Last Supper. Let's take a few minutes and let's talk about the Last Supper from this perspective. Now, without question, there are many more important things happening at the Last Supper than what I'm about to say. Okay? The theology around the Last Supper and the message that Jesus conveyed that regards the gospel is the most important part of the Last Supper. But I want us just to look at the Last Supper from a leadership perspective. I want you to consider how that Jesus created an environment of welcome in a number of ways where he was able to warm the hearts of those who were there, capture their attention, and say all kinds of things to them that moved his mission forward, well, for more than 2,000 years. And so let me talk about how that Jesus created an environment physically, spiritually, emotionally, attitudinally, and communicatively at the Last Supper, okay? Is everybody doing okay? Is the translation going well? Thank you, Gabriel, for doing a great job up there. If you need me to slow down or something, please let me know. So, a lot of folks don't notice the lengths that Jesus went to create an appropriate physical environment for the Last Supper. Jesus assigned his two top leaders, Peter and John, to go and to prepare a place for this supper to happen. Luke chapter 22 tells us that Jesus sent Peter and John saying, "Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover." Now, all of you know that the Passover was a very complicated endeavor. Where we live in New Jersey, we have a lot of Jewish friends, and preparations for the Passover take an incredibly long amount of time and a tremendous investment of resources. Jesus sent Peter and John and told them to go and to prepare for the Passover. And he said, "Say to the owner of the house, the teacher asked, 'Where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, all furnished. Make preparations there." They left and found things just as Jesus had told them, so they prepared the Passover. So he tells his disciples to go find this place. There's going to be a large room. It's going to be adequately furnished, and you're supposed to prepare the Passover, which meant that somehow or another they arranged for a lamb to be roasted. They arranged for 4 courses of wine to be sold to, to be prepared for each of the 12 plus 1 who were there at that dinner. It had to be a beautiful enough setting for Leonardo da Vinci to be able to paint a beautiful painting. I don't know how well that translated. But you just have to imagine Jesus was the one who made sure that this place, this physical place, was prepared. I think sometimes leaders don't understand the importance of physical environment. By the way, when God created the world, he didn't just throw it together. He took great care to make something beautiful to commune with humanity in. And I think leaders need to pay a lot of attention to the physical surroundings of the place in which they try to exercise leadership. And then, of course, even more importantly, he prepared the spiritual environment. And he prepared the spiritual environment by being in proper relationship with the Father. This was really more about who he was, what exuded from him because of who he was in relationship with the Father. John wrote about the Last Supper and said that Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Now, I don't have very much time to spend on this, but let me just say that the most important thing that a hospitable leader can do is to be in right relationship with God so that they know who they are, so that they are secure in their relationship with God, and so that they convey something that's safe and of a powerful, intangible quality through their spiritual state. I like to say warm hearts, warm hearts. Warm hearts, warm hearts. In other words, when you're in right relationship with God, your heart is warm. And when your heart is warm, there's something that happens that's communicated on a spiritual level that causes other people's hearts to be warm as well. You're communicating something from the depths of who you are, from the depths of your soul. Thirdly, he created an emotional environment that was welcoming. One translation of John's gospel tells us that as he sat with his disciples at this dinner, he showed them the full extent of his love. He showed them the full extent of his love. A hospitable leader makes certain that the people who follow them, the people that they serve, the people they want to influence, know how much the leader loves them. I know it's simple. I know it may be obvious, but it's not enough for you to know that you love the people that you're speaking to on Sunday morning. They have to know it. You have to show them the full extent of your love. The kids in the classroom that you teach, somehow or another, need to know how much you love them. The people who work for you at the business that you run might be a little different than a church context, but nonetheless, you need to find a way appropriate to the context of your business to show the people that work for you the full extent of your love. Your customers need to feel your love for them. Fourth, he created a welcoming attitudinal environment. He wrapped himself in a serving towel and he served his followers. One place that servant leadership is practiced best is in a welcoming environment. And a hospitable leader makes certain that the people that they're leading are being served by them. We show up to serve the people who follow us. And how do we serve the people who follow us? We find a way to meet their needs. The need those disciples had happened to be dirty feet during the Passover season when they were walking in the rainy season with sandals on their feet. And so Jesus washed their feet. Somehow or another, all of us have to identify the needs. The physical needs, the spiritual needs, the emotional needs, and so on, of the people who we lead. And we have to find a way to meet those needs. And our attitude is the attitude of servants. We're not, lording it over people. We're serving people. And then fifth and finally, then he now has a wonderful environment in which to communicate truth that's going to move his mission forward and move his mission forward for a very, very long time. In the Gospel of John, the Last Supper discourse takes place over, if I remember correctly, 5 chapters. If I remember correctly, it's from John 13 to John 18, where what he says at the Last Supper and on his way to and in the Garden of Gethsemane. It is a long, long discourse where Jesus talks about all kinds of things. I'd encourage you at some point to look at what he said in terms of a master class leadership talk. Again, we don't have time to get into it at length right now, but he introduced a new covenant. He cast vision for their shared future. Now, all of us who are leaders have to, as one of our most important efforts, we have to cast vision, right? We have to cast a vision of a preferred future and get people to be able to see that vision and to want to move towards that vision with us, right? Now, you can cast vision to people whose hearts are not warm with some success. But when you're at the Last Supper and you're in this room that's clearly prepared for the people who are showing up to be there, and you know who you are in relation to the Father, and your heart is warm, and you've conveyed to those people how much you love them, and you've been all about trying to meet their needs, and so on. Now then, when you cast vision, their hearts are fired up, and they want to follow what it is that you're calling them to do. And at the Last Supper, Jesus cast vision for their shared future. He inspired them to the most extreme team building. He gave them insight and buy-in into his Father's business. He actually used that language. He set goals. He established expectations and measurements. He didn't just say, this is what we're going to do. In fact, he said, I'm going to hold you accountable for this. He said in that discourse, I chose you so that you would go and bear fruit. In other words, as a leader, he wasn't just saying, hey, this is nice that we're all together, let's have a nice time, and isn't the food good? It was about more than that. He also said, now listen, here's your job. Here's your job description. Here are your annual objectives. Now, I chose you to get the job done. Hospitable leadership isn't just about being a nice guy. At some point, it also is results-based. You have to get the job done. The mission has to be accomplished. It's not everybody just sitting around singing Kumbaya, or I don't know if that translates or not. It's not everybody just sitting around saying, oh, isn't this sweet? No, you have an organization. The organization has to get its work done. The employees, I try to be a hospitable leader, but we still give annual reviews. Here's your job description. Did you do it? Here are, our values. Did you measure up to them? Here are the objectives you set at the beginning of the year. Did they get accomplished? Jesus says to his disciples, in this hospitable environment, I chose you to bear fruit. I'm getting sidetracked, but nonetheless. And then he prayed, of course, passionately for their unity and success. And these men went and changed the world. Now, when we create these kinds of conditions, we can more effectively exercise influence. Some of the things I'm talking about in the world of leadership are called soft leadership skills. Soft leadership skills are important in order to produce hard results. And so sometimes a highly driven leader, which I am one of those, walks into a situation and we just want to get to work and get the job done and say what needs to be said and all of that. But if you create an environment that helps people's hearts be warm, then your leadership efforts will be much more effective. So let me spend the rest of my time in this session then offering 3 hospitable thoughts. I'm going to talk about 2 now, and then in the next session, I'm going to do a deep dive on the 3rd one. Let me check on everybody again. Is everybody okay? You hearing okay? Most of you seem to still be awake. Makes me feel good. All right? Especially those of you back in the back there. All right? 3 hospitable thoughts. The first one is, we must create environments that warm hearts. I've already said this, but let's get into this a little bit more. So Jesus, constantly used hospitable environments to move his mission forward. I just spent a long time on one example of that. Maybe the best way to say this is to say that he used these environments to influence those he welcomed. He was exercising influence, which is primary to what leadership is. But he was doing it in these hospital environments. The feeding, and there was always something more going on than the hospital environment. The hospital environment was a means to a greater end. So for instance, when Jesus fed 5,000 plus hungry people, it was about feeding them and meeting their physical needs. That was important. But more than that, it was the higher level thing he was trying to accomplish, which he used that as a forum in which to describe himself as the bread of life. Or at the wedding of Cana, it was about more than making sure that they had what they needed to keep the feast going. It was at the wedding of Cana where he created that physical miracle that John's gospel says that he showed his glory for the first time. He used that to do something that was higher level than the environment that had been created. And I think that when Jesus spent time with people in a wide variety of hospitable settings, that what happened is that people felt at home with him. And I like to say that home is where the heart is warm. And as every good leader knows, and I'm repeating myself, but intentionally now, when people's hearts are warm, it is much easier to influence them to good and beautiful things. You remember the story about Jesus after his resurrection walking on the road to Emmaus, and he caught up with a couple of disciples and they weren't able to, they didn't understand who he was. They didn't recognize him until, of course, they were sitting and breaking bread. And then they understood who he was. And then later, they commented to one another, we should have known who he was all along, because our hearts were strangely warmed when he was with us. In other words, when our hearts felt warm, we should have recognized Jesus, because when we're with Jesus, that's how our hearts feel. And can I just say to you that what you want the people that you follow to feel when they're with you is so at home that their hearts are warm within them. And when you can learn how to warm people's hearts, you can exercise influence more effectively. We talk a lot about this in the church that I serve. One of our organizational values is, we have a document, a set of values that we call the TLCC way, the Life Christian Church, the TLCC way, and we have 5 values or 5 ways. And one of those is simply, we are always hospitable. Now, there's nothing that unusual about making a statement like that. But then we have several subpoints for each way. And one of the subpoints for we are always hospitable is we massage people's hearts. We massage people's hearts. It's commonly known that oftentimes at the end of an open heart surgery, that a surgeon will reach into the open chest cavity of the patient and massage their heart to get it beating properly again before they finish the job and close them up. And we try to teach our people that we're always thinking about how whatever we're doing is massaging people's hearts. So that could be the parking lot attendant. You guys don't have a parking lot yet here, but I think that you're going to have one soon, because you're going to have a miracle happen and you're going to have a parking lot. And when you do, you're going to have parking lot attendants out there, you know, like we do. I just want you to get that vision. And does your heart warm when I say that? You're going to be parking cars. But we tell our parking lot attendants, you're not just parking a car, you're massaging people's hearts. Somehow or another, you're conveying things to them where they feel something beyond you just doing the physical thing. When you serve a cup of coffee in the coffee bar, you're not just serving a cup of coffee. You're reaching into that person's chest cavity and massaging their heart. The way you speak to them, the way that you do a good job with the job that you're doing, the way that you say, you know, you're welcome, or abrigado, or whatever. You're doing more than just the thing. When someone gets up, for instance, to speak in our church, we teach our pastors, you are always very concerned about what people are feeling coming from you, and you're going to be a hospitable communicator. And part of that is you're going to think about how are you going to warm the people's hearts. Or when someone gets up to lead worship, when we start the service, what is it like to be a hospitable worship leader? Well, every church is going to do it differently, but in our church, we train our worship leaders. You get up with a smile on your face, a calm tone in your voice. First of all, you know who you are in relationship with the Father. You're settled, you're stable, your heart is warm, and you walk up and you invite the people to stand. You don't shout at them to stand, because you wouldn't do that to a guest in your home, for instance. You invite the people to stand. You ask the people. What our worship leaders say is, if you'd like to, we'd love for you to join with us in this song. Please. See, we're always thinking about how, before we ask people to do a thing, we're warming their hearts. And you can think about, so we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to talk to a group of donors, and we're going to try to raise a lot of money. And I've had to do a lot of that over the years. You're always thinking, before you're making the ask for money, you're working hard to try to warm the people's hearts so that when you're making the ask, they know how much you love them, for instance. They know that you're there to serve them. You've prepared a physical space that shows that you thought about them and cared about it. Anyway, I think you get the point. We're always trying to warm people's hearts. And the most important thing is to remember that warm hearts warm hearts. One other thing about this, there are a lot of leaders who just, I've said this, but I'll repeat myself a good bit tonight as part of my communication style. I know that you're listening through headphones and it's probably hard to get it all, so I'll repeat myself a little bit. A lot of leaders just want to get down to business. And they miss this. And their leadership is as effective as it could be if they paid more attention to these kinds of things. And this is something that I've had to learn. You're going to hold a staff meeting. How are you going to hold a staff meeting? You're going to, we talk about on our staff team, we talk about creating an environment where our team members feel like guests in our home. Now, we also will talk in terms of being like a family, but I actually have come to like the word guest better. Because when your family walks into the door of your house, you're not doing anything special for them typically, right? They take care of themselves. But if you have a guest come to your home, you're paying attention to things. You have a candle burning, maybe. You're greeting them at the door. You're taking their jacket. You've prepared something, perhaps some kind of appetizer for them to sit. You create that kind of environment even for your own team. The Last Supper, Jesus wasn't welcoming guests to the Last Supper. He was welcoming his team to the Last Supper. But he still is paying attention to all of these things. All right, let's skip then. Let me say this. One of the requirements of a New Testament church leader is hospitality. You guys all know that, right? So Esther, we're going to skip a verse or two. We're going to look at 1 Timothy 3:2. Paul told Timothy that a leader must enjoy having guests in his home. He told Christians in Rome that they must practice hospitality. The Apostle Peter told the church that they must offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. The writer of the Hebrews said, do not forget to show hospitality. This is an important part of what it means to be a New Testament church leader. All right, so 3 hospitable thoughts, and I've got 5 minutes left in this session, so I'll be quick with this second one, is that we must love loving strangers. This is something you're all familiar with. I'll speak quickly, but it's really important. I am fascinated and constantly convicted by the famous passage in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 1 and 2, where the writer said, keep on loving each other as brothers and sisters. That word there, the Greek word there, is Philadelphia. You have to, first of all, go to Philadelphia. It's hard enough to love your brothers and sisters. But that's where it begins. Keep on loving each other as brothers and sisters. But then he says, verse 2, remember to welcome strangers. And the Greek word there is philoxenia, which means to love, loving a stranger. Remember to welcome strangers because some who have done this have welcomed angels without knowing. Another translation says, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. So again, in this passage we're told first to welcome our brothers and sisters, practice brotherly love, go to Philadelphia. Then we're told to move from Philadelphia to a place called Philoxenia. Philoxenia is this word that's translated welcome strangers or show hospitality to strangers or entertain strangers. And it literally means love loving strangers. Again, A variety of scriptures tell us that hospitality or loving strangers was a requirement for church leaders in the New Testament. The stranger, for the purpose of this discussion, is anyone who seems strange to you or to whom you seem strange. This could be someone you do not know or who does not know you, whose background, worldview, or lifestyle may seem strange to you. A stranger may be someone who's from a different nation of origin, race, ethnicity, or the opposite gender, or someone from a different socioeconomic or educational status, or, God forbid, someone who has different political views than you, or especially someone who doesn't believe in Jesus at all. Scripture repeatedly calls us to love the stranger. Moses said, "For the Lord your God loves the stranger, therefore love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And Jesus said that when we welcome strangers, we welcome him. He said, "I was a stranger, and you invited me in." I believe that Christians everywhere need to love loving people who are not like them in a wide variety of ways. That we must be passionate about showing hospitality to people who are strange to us and to whom we are strange. Our hearts need to fire up when someone who is not like us graces the doors of our church, for instance, or our online service. Someone from a different race, someone from a different denomination, someone from a different political party. We should fall all over ourselves to show hospitality. Love, not tolerance, but love. We're not just tolerating people, we're loving people. And we're called to love the stranger. Now, we should do this because it's right. Jesus came to tear down the dividing wall of hospitality between people and God and people and people. And as the Apostle Paul taught us, his purpose was to create in himself one new humanity. And he was talking about Jew and Gentile, people who were very strange to one another. Paul said Jesus came to bring those people together and to create out of these two different people, one people, or one new humanity. So we should do this because it's right, but we should also do this because it's smart. We cannot expand our influence to people who we do not welcome. We cannot expand our influence to people who we do not welcome. So oftentimes, the very people that we would like to persuade, the very person we'd like to maybe speak truth to in some way, or change their mind, or bring them over to our side in some way. We could talk about this in all kinds of ways. Because they're strange to us, we are not welcoming, and because we do not welcome them, we cannot influence them. One of the great privileges of my life is that Sharon and I lead a church where we have, people from all over the world, and from a variety of races, ethnicities, nations of origin, people from people that I disagree with strongly politically, for instance. And somehow or another, our church has created an environment where all kinds of different kind of people like to be together and have come together around the gospel and around Jesus and around Scripture and around, trying to move the mission of Jesus forward. And consequently, I spend a lot of time with people who are not like me. And it's one of the most wonderful things. It's hard. It makes my leadership life much more challenging. It'd be so much easier if I preached every week to people who just thought the same way. I think about everything, had the same life experiences that I've had. But here's what I've learned happens. The writer to the Hebrews said, "Be careful to welcome the stranger, because when you do, you might be welcoming an angel from God. And I've learned that oftentimes when I welcome the stranger, that person is in fact an angel. Not literally an angel, though that certainly could happen, but angel means a messenger from God. And many times when I risked welcoming into my life someone not like me, that person has been someone God has used to be a messenger to me. And He's allowed me oftentimes to be a messenger to them. So one of the things we have to learn how to do, friends, is see the angel in every stranger. So we see that person on television arguing the opposite political view. And instead of saying, I wish I could yell at that person. Instead, if we said, I wonder if I could somehow see the possibility in that person. I wonder if somehow I could sit at the table with that person and have an opportunity maybe even to speak some truth to them that may change their mind. But nonetheless, if we don't sit at the table with each other, we have no opportunity to influence. And so hospitable leaders learn to love loving strangers. And if you pick up the book, you'll hear me talk, for instance, about how that Abraham welcomed strangers to his tent, how that he hurried to welcome them. He ran to welcome them. He was quick to welcome them. Once you've experienced strangers becoming angels again and again and again, you develop a capacity to love the opportunity to welcome strangers because you see the possibility in every possible relationship. So that's it for this first session, and I hope people come back for the second one.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Som. Estou sem palavras para dizer como foi bom essa primeira parte aqui. Bom, nós vamos ter agora um tempo de processar isso um pouco, tá? Nós vamos ter aí 5 a 7 minutinhos. E eu queria até que voltasse o slide aqui, se você puder voltar o slide, que ele disse que a gente não pode influenciar pessoas sem acolhê-las. Acho que é um dos últimos aqui. E o que nós vamos fazer agora? Se você quiser ficar de pé para esticar as pernas aí um pouco, fique à vontade. Mas você vai escolher 2 ou 3 pessoas, se você está com a sua equipe aqui, de tudo que você ouviu, você vai dizer para a pessoa do lado aquilo que foi mais importante e como você pode colocar em prática dentro do seu contexto de liderança, tá bom? Então nós vamos aí trazer para a nossa realidade o que a gente acabou de ouvir. Com certeza você teve muitos pensamentos. Se você quiser bater esse papo de pé, sentado, fique muito à vontade. Mas do que você ouviu, o que mais ali te chamou a atenção e como você pode colocar em prática na sua realidade? Bom, se você já teve essa conversa aí, eu vou acolher a opinião das pessoas aqui. Alguns saíram para ir no banheiro, tomar uma aguinha, sair lá fora. Então, nós vamos dar 10 minutinhos para você fazer isso. Faz um favor para mim, fala para a pessoa do lado aí, 10 minutinhos, tá? É 10 mesmo. Então, daqui 10 minutinhos, nós voltamos às 8h32 para a nossa continuidade. Relax and come back. So 10 minutes. Are, chama o pessoal para mim, por gentileza, de maneira bem acolhedora. Dizer que aqui o ambiente está preparado para recebê-los. Pastor Jafé, se você vê alguém também, por favor, traz para dentro para mim. Como um bom pastor de ovelhas, você arrebanha a turma. É isso. Samuel, põe para mim o slide que foi falado aqui, só para a gente começar a partir dele, que é o que eu citei. Não podemos expandir nossa influência para pessoas que não acolhemos. Acho que essa é uma frase boa para a gente lembrar dela. Ok, então estamos seguindo para a nossa segunda parte aqui. Se você ainda não entrou, por favor, venha. Pastor Rafael, acho que a maioria já está chegando. Bom, acho que agora já pode começar. Minha esposa acabou de entrar, então podemos fazer um pontinho com a esposa, né, gente? Bom, antes até de nós darmos continuidade, nós queríamos fazer alguns agradecimentos ou reconhecimentos aqui de convidados que estão conosco, né? Então, se você está entrando, por favor, fique à vontade de sentar. Mas aqueles que são da casa aqui, eu queria mais uma vez agradecer à Batista do Povo por ter, de uma maneira, assim, tanto a equipe pastoral como os membros, abraçado esse evento, estado conosco aqui. Mas aqueles que são da casa sabem o quanto no último ano, nos 2 últimos anos, nós somos presenteados com uma oportunidade muito especial de podermos servir junto a administração penitenciária do Estado de São Paulo. Para nós isso é um privilégio, é uma alegria, e que a gente tem feito com um coração muito grato pelas oportunidades, e com isso Deus também nos presenteia com a oportunidade de conhecermos pessoas que têm feito um trabalho extraordinário como servidores públicos. E eu queria aqui mencionar mais uma vez e agradecer a presença do Dr. Rodrigo Andrade e sua esposa, a senhora Viviane. Dr. Rodrigo, ele tem a responsabilidade de ser o diretor-geral da Polícia Penal, é a pessoa responsável aí pela gestão de todo o sistema penitenciário do Estado de São Paulo. Para nós é uma honra, uma alegria o senhor estar conosco. Para nós é um motivo de muito orgulho ver o senhor aqui aprendendo como ser um líder acolhedor, que seja um tempo de crescimento e que agregue ainda mais. Mas, como Igreja Batista do Povo, nós também aqui gostaríamos de mais uma vez reconhecer o quanto admiramos o trabalho do senhor, da equipe, de todos aqueles que temos a oportunidade de conhecer, não só da estrutura ali de comando, mas toda vez que nós entramos numa unidade, eu saio como cidadão orgulhoso pelos profissionais que nós vemos e como fazem isso como uma missão de vida e não como um trabalho. Então, mais uma vez, queria agradecer a presença do senhor. Também fazendo aqui o agradecimento à presença da senhora Gisele Rodrigues, coordenadora de ensino, cultura e pesquisa da Polícia Penal, que sempre acolhe os nossos convites, com muita alegria está aqui conosco. A senhora Andréia Crudo, que é a coordenadora de recursos humanos, que também está conosco, junto com a sua equipe. Para nós é uma alegria ter vocês aqui. E também, estendendo aqui, eu queria mencionar a presença do Dr. McPeer. O Dr. McPeer está ali no fundo. O Dr. McPeer é um dos fundadores do Movement Day, que nós temos o privilégio, este evento aqui faz parte do Dr. McPeer, juntamente com o pastor Tim Keller. Ele é o responsável por essa criação, é uma pessoa que não só nos compartilha sabedoria, mas também exemplo de vida. Dr. Mac, thank you for having this opportunity for us here at that church. God bless your life. E nós também gostaríamos de mencionar aqui amigos que caminham conosco nesse trabalho como liderança, que é o pessoal do Além do Sucesso, que está aqui, pastor Robson, pastor Ariel. Por favor, fique de pé também. Se você quer saber como realmente transformar a vida de pessoas através de mesas redondas de liderança, eles podem te ajudar. Recentemente, 3 milhões de pessoas que participaram de mesas do Além do Sucesso tiveram um encontro pessoal com Jesus. Então, é algo assim admirável, né? Então, se você quiser saber mais, converse com eles. Quem participou, muitos participaram como eu, sabem o impacto disso. E o pastor Samuel Lima, que é aí o responsável no Brasil pelo movimento, pelo Movement Day, e escolheu o Batista do Povo. Acho que a gente foi presenteado aqui de termos aqui o evento. Então, fomos aí agraciados aí como a igreja que foi escolhida. Então, quem está preparado aí para continuar? Mais uma parte, vamos ouvir pastor Terry. Não se esqueça que hoje é o primeiro lugar que o livro está sendo vendido. Então, se você quer levar o livro em primeira mão, aí você pode colocar no seu Instagram, olha, eu tenho, você não tem. Não é um jeito acolhedor de dizer isso, né? Desculpa, então retiro o que eu disse. Mas é dizer, olha, estive aqui na primeira palestra do Terry no Brasil para ver o livro em primeira mão. Olha, você é um... Diga para a pessoa do seu lado, você é um privilegiado, cara. Você, olha, você é um privilegiado. Então, se você quiser levar um livro, no final nós vamos ter um tempo a mais para o Terry poder fazer ali uma dedicatória. Então, sem mais delongas, porque eu já passei demais do tempo, eu gostaria de convidar mais uma vez o pastor Terry para continuar aqui.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and it's such a privilege for me to be with you. So, in 2005, my wife Sharon ran the New York City Marathon, her first marathon. She's run several since, but her running the marathon was a really big deal for our family. She, I think, probably a very typical mom and wife, has always been so incredibly supportive of me and our 3 children. You know, she's always cheering for us, and this was a kind of a unique opportunity for our family to be able to cheer for her. And so, you know, she spent quite a bit of time preparing for this marathon. Her goal was to run this for, was it your 40th birthday, sweetheart? For her 40th birthday, and she didn't get in that year, but it was soon thereafter. So this is the first time in her life she's doing anything like that. And so she worked really hard for a long time preparing to run the marathon. And the marathon took place, as it always does, on a Sunday. And I made what turned out to be a foolish decision. We decided together that I could be in our first Sunday morning service. Our campus is about 13 miles outside of Manhattan. So we decided I could be in the first Sunday morning service, and then me and the kids could make our way into the city, and there was a place at the 8th mile marker of the marathon for us to cheer for her. And so we had a couple of friends who were really familiar with getting around that part of the city, and we trained over this into the city and went to the 8th mile marker and stood and watched as thousands of runners ran by, none of which were Sharon. And we realized that she was running faster than she thought she would, and that this big moment in her life, all of our lives, we missed because I had to be at the 9 o'clock service on that Sunday morning, which was, again, a stupid decision. Well, so I was pretty desperate. You know, the New York City Marathon, there are 2 million spectators, and there are about 50,000 people running, and so it's craziness. And so we figured that the next place that we could see her would be at the 22 mile marker. But we had to jump on 3 different subways, come out into an incredibly busy area, and I elbow battled my way through the crowd with my kids following along behind and our friends, because I was not going to miss her running this marathon. And I move people out of my way, come up to the barrier, and there's a wide street, 2 or 3 bands playing very loud music within our vicinity. And I'm looking for her, and I see her all the way across the street. She stopped to get some water. I'm screaming her name, and she looks around, but she doesn't see us. And this was kind of before you would carry a cell phone running a marathon, so she didn't have a phone. There was no way to contact her. She didn't know where we were. And I found myself getting desperate. I'm sorry, I think that was the 17-mile marker, if I'm correct. And I took off running down the road to try to catch her. And frankly, I probably hurt some people as I was doing it, because I didn't care. If somebody's in my way, they were going to move. My wife was going to see I ended up standing up on the barricade, screaming with all my lungs, "Sharon, Sharon, Sharon." And she just took off running. Well, now I'd gotten separated from my kids. I'd lost my cell phone. I knew that there were adults with my kids. They were going to be okay. I was going to see my wife run this marathon. And so I found a police officer, told him the situation, where should I go, and he directed me to the 22nd mile marker, which was all the way across Manhattan. So I took off, ran my own marathon all the way across Manhattan, showed up and now I'm a little confused here. I think it was the 25th mile marker. Showed up at the 25th mile marker in Central Park in the middle of Manhattan, and found my way to the front of the barricade, and I stood there soaking wet, hungry, needing a restroom. But I stood there for an hour and 20 minutes watching thousands of people run by, and finally I see her coming. And she was exhausted. She was, tempted to quit, though of course she wouldn't. And in an incredibly beautiful moment, I called her name. She looked up. She saw me. I saw her. I jumped over the barricade, which is illegal. Don't tell all the police who are here tonight. Jumped over the barricade, and I ran the last mile with her, and then jumped over the barricade again before she got to the finish line. And I learned something really, really important that day. I already understood how much Sharon needed her family to cheer for her that day. But what really surprised me was learning how much I needed to cheer for her. I needed for her to hear me yell her name. I needed for her to know that I was for her. I needed her to know in that moment how much I loved her. I'm reminded when I tell that story of the line in a 2004 romantic comedy called Shall We Dance, which I only watched because it was the only thing on an airplane one day. And in this movie, there's a wife who's suffering a discouraging time in her marriage, and she was asked by a very cynical advisor why she believed in the ideal of marriage. And she answered, because we need a witness to our lives. In a marriage, you're promising to care about everything, the good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things. You're saying your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness. Well, that day at the New York City Marathon, I learned how badly I needed to be a witness. I needed to be a supportive, yelling like a lunatic, I know you're tired and feel like giving up, but you can do it kind of a witness. Now, this passion to witness another person's success probably doesn't surprise you in the setting of a marriage. I think any married couple in the room understands that need to have someone witness your life and to be a witness to someone's life. But I think about this story when I think about the third thing I want to talk about tonight as it concerns hospitable leadership, which is this: the longer that I've led and the more I've explored the ideas around hospitable leadership, the more I find myself passionate about seeing the dreams of others come true, especially those I lead. I have discovered something in myself as I've gotten older that I wasn't aware of, frankly, when I was a younger leader. And that is that I find tremendous satisfaction in encouraging the dreams of others. I love to see other people win. I need to witness other people's success. And one thing that a hospitable leader does is they stand on the barricade and shout with all their heart to see the people that they're leading win and succeed, and to see their dreams come true. And that's why the third welcome of hospitable leadership is called dreams. Hospitable leaders are hospitable to people's dreams. So the way that we left the last session, I talked about 3 ideas for hospitable leadership. The third one, and now what I'm going to dig into at length here, is we must be hospitable to people and their dreams, and this is centered in the third welcome of hospitable leadership, which is called dreams. So let's do it this way. 3 ways hospitable leaders are hospitable to people and their dreams. The first one is hospitable leaders are for more and better life than people ever dreamed of. Hospitable leaders are for more and better life than people ever dreamed of. History, as you well know, is littered with leaders who appeared to believe that the primary purpose of their leader power was to make their own dreams come true. Of course, leaders must have dreams, and the bigger our dreams, the better. But I submit that a central emphasis of our dream must be to serve the dreams of the people that we lead. We must be able to focus on the goals of the entity we are leading, a company, a family, a football team, a nation. Whatever it is we're leading, we need to focus on those goals while at the same time focusing on the dreams of the individuals who people that entity. I like to talk about moral leadership. My first book is a book called Live 10. And in Live 10, which is all about what Jesus taught in John chapter 10, verse 10, in Live 10, I offer a definition of moral leadership. I don't want to confuse you with too many definitions tonight, but let's talk just for a minute about moral leadership. My definition of moral leadership is this: moral leaders inspire, influence, and empower others to self-actualization. I hope that translates into Portuguese adequately. I can find another word if needed. Self-actualization and the accomplishment of mission. Self-actualization. Does that translate okay? Self-actualization here is about the highest level of human development. A self-actualized person is someone who is reached the zenith of their potential and become in actuality everything that they had the possibility of becoming. I actually prefer to use the term God actualized. But we will stick with self-actualization right now. And so I say that moral leaders inspire, influence, and empower others to self-actualization and the accomplishment of mission, which is to say that a leader is not just thinking about a mission being accomplished, which they must think about, but they're also thinking about the self-actualization of the people in the organization that they're leading to accomplish the mission. And the fact is that many leaders think about the goal of the organization and do not think about the dreams of the people who are in it. And many times, as a consequence, people feel used in the accomplishment of the leader's dreams and have had no one pay any attention to their dreams. And I think moral leaders, Hitler was a great leader if you're just looking at leadership as the exercise of influence. But he was an immoral leader, obviously, right? Moral leadership has a different set of qualities. You lead people in different ways. And one thing a moral leader does is they think not only about the accomplishment of their dream, they think about the accomplishment of the dreams of the people who are following them. Now, just to place moral leadership in the context of hospitable leadership, in hospitable leadership, I talk about how that hospitable leaders create environments where moral leaders can lead people more effectively, okay? But as leaders, we have to care about the accomplishment of the dreams of the people we're leading. In John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus said that he came to give life in all of its fullness. Or the way that this is translated in English in the Message translation. I don't know, again, how that translates into this world, but nonetheless, Jesus said that he came to give people more and better life than they ever dreamed of. Jesus said that he came to give more and better life than they ever dreamed of. A lot of people don't realize that John chapter 10 is really a passage where Jesus is talking about leaders. And he's talking about the difference between good leaders and bad leaders, or good shepherds and bad shepherds. Now, there's a lot of history behind this, but he's making some specific references during the time of Hanukkah to leadership that had caused God's people to enter into a very bad period of their history. And Jesus calls the leaders who led God's people during that time bad shepherds. And he contrasts bad shepherds with good shepherds. And he says essentially that bad shepherds or bad leaders constantly take, seldom give, and primarily make their leadership effort about meeting their own needs. On the other hand, he says, a good shepherd calls his own sheep by name. He leads them, and they follow him because they're familiar with his voice. And then he sums up his leadership talk with John chapter 10, verse 10, where he says, a thief is only there to kill and steal and destroy. I came so that they might have real and eternal life, more and better life than they ever dreamed of. And then he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd puts the sheep before himself and sacrifices himself as necessary. So again, this is another example. There's a powerful theological point being made in John chapter 10, verse 10, when we talk about the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy and all of that. But what Jesus was specifically talking about right there were bad leaders or bad shepherds. And he said bad leaders or immoral leaders, I would say, they're thieves. They take life from people. They steal, they kill, they destroy. They put themselves before the need of those who follow them. But good shepherds, on the other hand, are life givers. They give people more and better life than they ever dreamed of. The point is, at least in part, that a good leader is a giver, not a taker. We lead people rather than drive them. People follow good leaders willingly and let us take them from here to there because they want to follow good leaders. They know that a good leader would lay down their life for the followers. And this idea is crystallized in Jesus modeling how a good leader or a moral leader promises life in all of its fullness, or more and better life than the followers even dreamed of. It so happens at the Life Christian Church where I pastor that this is our theme verse. And the mission of our church is to inspire people to the life God dreams for them as we spread His love in ever-widening circles. So I tell my congregation regularly, I get up every day to help your God-inspired dreams come true. And we have a mission. We're spreading God's love in ever-widening circles. And I want you to be a part of seeing this church's dreams come true. But I want you to know that one of our dreams as a church is for your dream to come true. I want to be a leader who's standing up on the barricade, cheering on the dreams of those who follow me. And so nothing makes me happier than to see someone in my congregation who has a dream to start a business, who starts a business and the business succeeds, or has a dream, to go into start a nonprofit and to see the nonprofit succeed, or who has a dream to start a family and the family grows, or who has a dream to maybe become a professional athlete and they become successful. And I believe that a large part of a hospitable leader's effort in life is to cheer their followers on in seeing their dreams come true. Now, that doesn't mean then that a hospitable leader doesn't have dreams. And it doesn't mean that a hospitable leader isn't asking people to join in the effort to help the dreams of the organization come true. In fact, one of the greatest gifts that we give people is to help them to be a part, if you're leading a church, for instance, of a church that's growing and thriving and preaching the gospel and establishing the kingdom of God. That actually expands people's hearts, helps them dream bigger in their life, and becomes a big part of their own self-actualization. They get to be a part of something bigger than they are. So don't misunderstand me. A leader needs to have goals. An organization needs to have a mission. We need to have metrics to make sure that the things that we set out to do are actually coming to pass. Those things are all very, very important. While at the same time caring profoundly about the dreams of the people who we are serving. Here's the second thing that's important to this. So we're talking about three ways hospitable leaders are hospitable to people in their dreams. The first one is that hospitable leaders are for more and better life than people ever dreamed of. In other words, at the end of the day, I want people to have bigger dreams for their life than they had before they met me. I want to encourage their dreams. Secondly, hospitable leaders help people find their place. Hospitable leaders help people find their place. One of the great opportunities of hospitable leadership is that we have the privilege of helping people find their place in this world. We're not only hospitable to people in their dreams, but we're dream refiners. We are constantly encouraging people to ask themselves the question, what is the life God dreams for me? What is the life God dreams for me? So we should be regularly asking those we lead, including our children, some variation of what do you believe God dreamed for you? And one way that we talk about this at the Life Christian Church, and that I've written about in several of my books, is an idea that we call area of destiny. We try to help people discover and actualize their area of destiny. Area of destiny is about knowing what God made your life to be about. It's about knowing the life God dreams for you. Now, I've written extensively about this, and there's a chapter about this in The Hospitable Leader, so I'll just get to touch on it here for just a moment. But one of the most important things an individual can figure out is, what is it that God made my life to be about? What is the life God dreams for me? Again, we call this area of destiny. It's the parameters of our life. It's God saying, this is what your life's supposed to be about, and you can be anything here. A lot of times people will say to children, for instance, you can be anything you want to be in this world. And the fact is, that's not true. You can't be anything you want to be in this world. I can't be the president of Brazil. I can want to be the president of Brazil, but that's clearly not what my life is supposed to be about. I can't, I'm not going to be a famous rock and roll singer. I don't have the talent to be but here's the thing. When you figure out what God made your life to be about, that's where you have nearly unlimited potential. You can be anything in your area of destiny. That's where there's all kinds of possibility. That's where you can go after a dream in that context and experience more than you ever dreamed of. And I like to say that area of destiny is the intersect of three things. Area of destiny is the intersect, first of all, of mission. And mission is where you ask the question, what is the mission God has given me? What is it that God needs me to do in this world? What is my mission? The second is gifting. You have to ask the question, obviously, what is it that God gifted me to do? I can't, if I don't have a good singing voice, my area of destiny isn't going to be a professional singer, right? It has to be a gift, and not only that, friends, but it has to be a gift that you turn into a skill. Not enough to have a gift. You have to develop the gift until the gift allows you to make a unique contribution within your area of destiny. So gifting has to be turned into skills. And then the third thing is passion. What is it that you love to do? One of the ways that we get a sense of what God made our life to be about is by knowing the things that we love doing. What are the things that we enjoy doing? That is a hint from God as to what He's made our lives to be about. So area of destiny is the intersect of our mission, passion, and gifting. And when we discover our area of destiny and we know what our life is supposed to be about, then we can go after that thing. One of the things that I heard Alay mention earlier is that Jack Welch, I'm saying this spontaneously, I happened to have a conversation with someone about this yesterday. Hadn't thought about Jack for a while, but Jack endorsed his book. Jack was the CEO of the largest corporation in the world for many, many, many years. And Jack and his wife, Susie, who was the editor of the Harvard Business Review, heard me speak in a meeting like this in a church in Manhattan one day, and it so happened that I was speaking about area of destiny. And they got very excited about this idea, and they sent me an email that day and invited me to come actually to their penthouse apartment in Manhattan to have a discussion around this book that I just released and around this idea of area of destiny. And they ended up doing a good bit of writing about that, and still Susie's taken this now, and she now talks about area of transcendence, and that's what she teaches about it at NYU right now, but it came from my area of destiny idea. And they were quoted they were interviewed a number of times around this idea because they wrote it about in one of their books and gave me credit for it in it. And they were quoted in a Reuters column where they say that every time that they see their young adult children, they ask them the question, how is your area of destiny doing today? And I thought that was fun. In fact, what they said is, in this article, we heard this idea from this pastor named Terry Smith, blah, 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 and we always ask our kids, how is your area of destiny doing today? And I think, in fact, that this is a question that hospitable leaders are frequently asking the people they follow. How are you doing in your area of destiny? How are you doing on your dreams? How are you doing in the life God dreamed for you? How is it going for you? And at the Life Christian Church, we do, I think it's an 8-week class now on helping people discover their area of destiny. And by the way, whatever we have around things like that, we're happy to make available to anybody who wants it. We've had some people on our team develop this into something really marvelous. By the way, all the materials and all of my sermons and teachings around the hospitable leader are available free of charge at terryasmith.com. And not only the hospitable leader, but several of my other books. We always offer all of my sermon series for free. We love it when other pastors take some of this stuff and use it, or we have business people who take this and use this in their businesses. There's the school system in our township has been highly influenced by hospitable leadership thinking. Any of that, we're happy to help you. So here's the third and final thing then that I want to talk about. So first of all, hospitable leaders care about the dreams of their followers. Secondly, we don't just care. We actually try to help people discover what God's dreams for them. We invest in that. And then thirdly and finally, hospitable leaders understand that dreams are worth fighting for. So, let me check in on everybody again. Is everybody doing okay? Can you listen for 10 more minutes? Great. Well, then I'll go 20. No, I'm kidding. I won't really. Thank you, both of you who laughed. I appreciate it. So, as a dreamer and a person who's had to struggle and suffer at times to help make the dreams God has given me a reality, I have some sense, as every leader does, of what it takes to pursue something great. I know that if I have a worthy vision, I'll usually face great resistance. All of us who've led anything long enough know that if we have a dream, there are always dream resistors, right? All kinds of forces, in the world around us, in the world of spiritual darkness, in our own flesh. There are all kinds of things, people who will resist our dreams. It's like all the powers of this world and the dark world align themselves to stop dreamers and their dreamers. And so, part of what happens when we inspire people to dream and to go to work to make their dreams come true is that those people we inspire will struggle and suffer for their dreams. Now, I want to talk to you about this from the perspective not of your struggle, but of the struggle the people you inspire are going to have because you inspired them. You get people dreaming big enough, you're going to mess their lives up to some extent. Because it costs something to make dreams come true. Of course, it ends up being worth it, but you have to suffer for it. And so part of what happens is I'll frequently have people come up to me on Sunday morning as I stand in the lobby and greet them as they leave, and somebody will say, "Hey, Pastor Terry, you inspired me to start a new business." Or somebody will say, "Hey, Pastor, you inspired me to go back to school." Or you inspired me to run for the school board, or you inspired me to launch a nonprofit, or you inspired me to ask her to marry me. And I'll think, yes, I love to hear that. I inspired these people to do these things. And then someone will say something like, "My new business is really struggling. The business you inspired me to start, Pastor, is really struggling, and I hope we're going to make it through this quarter," or some similar thing, and my heart drops. And I'm tempted to say something like, "Well, I'm sorry I inspired you." Seriously. But instead, because I know ultimately what's true, I'll say something like, "Hey, I'm sorry you're struggling, but you have to relish the fight. God will use this to shape you. Isn't this battle better than having some uninspired status quo life? You're going to make it. Don't lose the faith. Your struggle now will make the victory sweeter in your future. Someday, this is going to make a great story. I'm praying for you." Because I know that they need to struggle and sacrifice to see great things happen in their life. I know that it'll be worth it for them in the end. I know seeing a God dream come true has tremendous rewards associated with it. And so I have to be willing to watch the people I inspire struggle, and I have to calculate how I work that in the way that I lead them. And you know, a mistake that parents will make oftentimes is they'll say to their kids, I sacrifice for you so you don't have to sacrifice. And I understand why we say things like that, but the fact is, if we love our kids, we want them to have to sacrifice for something great in their lives, don't they? Don't. We want them to have a dream. We want them to have to struggle and suffer to see the dream come true. And if we've done all the dreaming for them, we deny them of a very important part of what it means to live a self-actualized life. And so I have, one of the things that I struggle with right now is, I have a couple of my kids who have really big dreams. And I'm watching them in their young adulthood pay the price for those dreams to come true. And I have to encourage them not just to have a big dream, but I have to help them in the struggle of seeing those dreams come true. And so, part of life fulfillment comes when we have a great cause to fight for, and we cannot deny this experience to our followers, whether they're fighting in pursuit of their own God-given dreams or whether they're fighting in pursuit of the dreams that God's given us and the thing we lead. And by the way, if you're leading an organization and you're calling people to accomplish an organizational dream, you can't feel badly because they have to sacrifice to see the dream come true. As long as you're a good shepherd who cares about their dreams and their lives and their families and their finances, as long as you're fundamentally a hospitable leader and you care about their self-actualization, you're also excited about the fact that you always have a dream big enough as a pastor, as a business leader, as a nonprofit leader, you always have a dream big enough that's forcing people to have to struggle to see that dream come true. Let me close with this. So, I told you a few moments ago that I frequently get up and tell my congregation that I get up every day to help see their dreams come true. And it's amazing how people respond to a leader when they know that leader means that. It's amazing the way that they respond to you. It doesn't mean it's all perfect. Doesn't mean there aren't challenges and struggles and that people won't still disappoint you and so on. We're all humans. But nonetheless, it's amazing the way people will respond to you. There's an author you may be familiar with named Stephen Pressfield, and he uses powerful leadership language in his historical novel about Alexander the Great. Alexander, in this historical novel, is explaining what made his armies so wildly successful. And he said what made his army so successful was the heart of the individual soldier and each soldier's will to fight. His soldiers' hearts were forged and their wills inspired in response to Alexander's passionate leadership. And he describes in one really beautiful passage in this book how he felt the first time that he led men into battle. Now again, this is Alexander the Great describing what he felt the first time that he led soldiers into battle. He said, "I was so overcome that I could not stay myself from weeping. I was moved by the sight of them in such brilliant order, by their scars and their silence, the weathered creasing of their faces. When men saw my state, they returned my devotion, for they knew I would burst my heart for them." I love that line. When the men saw my state, they returned my devotion, for they knew I would burst my heart for them. I love this picture. Alexander's men marched into victorious battle again and again with burning hearts in response to a leader who they knew would burst his heart for them. And as a leader, I want people to hear my voice and passionately and willingly follow me because they know I'm not just leading them to fulfill my God-given dreams, but my heart burst for them. I want to lead them to more and better life than they ever dreamed of. A hospitable leader has a heart that is warm towards their followers, and when it is, their followers' hearts become warm towards you, and they'll follow you pretty much anywhere. And so I think that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Alguns anos atrás, uma música ficou muito popular no Brasil, uma música falando sobre a cidade de São Paulo, e o nome da música é Não Existe Amor em SP. E este ano, na Semana do Movimento, nós escolhemos e nos sentimos guiados para dizer, existe amor em SP. E é por isso que nós convidamos o pastor Terry para trazer esse treinamento esta noite. Porque no Movement Day a nossa visão não é apenas que eu receba um treinamento para ter mais informação e mais um livro na prateleira, mas mobilizar igrejas, organizações, empresas, negócios e famílias para expressar o amor de Deus, a hospitalidade, o acolhimento do Evangelho em toda a nossa cidade e pela graça de Deus mudar a cultura dessa cidade pelo poder de Jesus Cristo. E eu quero, mais uma vez, agradecer à Igreja Batista do Povo por nos acolher de uma forma tão calorosa. Vocês não sabem, mas, na verdade, o nosso primeiro lugar de reunião para planejar essa semana foi no escritório da Igreja Batista do Povo. E nós oramos juntos, planejamos juntos e viemos trabalhando. Estamos aqui esta noite. Vai ter mais coisas aqui ainda. No domingo, vocês vão poder ouvir o Dr. McPeer falando mais aqui. E eu quero agradecer vocês por nos receber. Mas eu também queria convidar o irmão Elielson, da Central Gospel, editora que lançou o livro do pastor Terry, para vir aqui. And I want to ask you, Terry, could you please come here as well? Nós temos, em nome da editora, um pequeno presente para o Terry. Todos vocês estão recebendo a oportunidade de adquirir hoje o livro O Líder Acolhedor, do Terry. Depois, daqui a pouco, ele vai estar ali autografando. E a editora também preparou uma cópia especial para ele, para que ele possa levar para casa e ter a edição em português. So this is a special copy of the Portuguese edition for you, with a special letter of thank you to you. Você quer dizer alguma palavra?
É uma alegria poder participar desse evento. A Central Gospel ela tem 26 anos de história. Nós já trabalhamos com catálogo na área de ensino. A nossa parte estrutural como editora era de ensino. Nós temos um currículo de escola dominical, trabalhamos com professores, com pastores. E o pastor Samuel esteve em contato conosco quando fez uma agenda do pastor Terry. E o pastor Terry lá mesmo nos Estados Unidos comentou que tinha uma editora no Brasil com a obra dele. E aí, pela graça de Deus, podemos nos unir e estar aqui. Então, eu, em nome da editora, quero agradecer a Deus por estar aqui, a nossa diretora Elba Alencar. E muito obrigado, foi um aprendizado para nós também. Eu posso levar uma bagagem de muito conhecimento aqui e compartilhar lá. E espero que cada um de nós aqui possamos pegar todo esse conteúdo e multiplicar esse conteúdo, aquecermos corações. Achei muito bonito isso, é isso que a gente vai levar para frente. Obrigado, pastor Samuel. Deus abençoe.
Sim. Let's take a picture. De tirar uma foto. É muito importante que você Pegue esse livro, estude com a sua equipe, com a sua igreja, com a sua liderança, converse sobre esse tema, revisite e ore a Deus para realmente criar uma cultura acolhedora. E por isso eu quero encorajar você a aproveitar a oportunidade, adquirir o livro, o Líder Acolhedor ainda hoje. Você tem a oportunidade de ter o autógrafo daqui a pouco do Terry também. E continue falando, meditando nesse tema e trabalhando em cima desse assunto.
Já estamos encerrando, então. E enquanto o Terry ele vai se posicionar lá, eu queria que você prestasse atenção em 2 recados. O primeiro é, não esqueça de devolver o seu equipamento. Eu sei que às vezes ele fica tão acolhedor aí também em você. Então não esqueça de receber. E a última coisa, eu queria convidar você, uma das apoiadoras, além da Batista do Povo aqui desse evento, foi o Summit, o Global Leadership Summit. E aí eu quero já avisar você de um evento que vai acontecer em outubro. Então, que nós vamos ter a oportunidade de ouvir do pastor que é o responsável pelo Global Leadership Summit. Então, eu vou tirar esse púlpito aqui, nós vamos assistir um vídeo. Tá certo aí, Samuel? Tá certinho? Ei, Samuel é bom. Obrigado, viu, Samuel? Samuel, Jubal, poxa, vocês são bênção demais. Nós vamos assistir esse vídeo. Terminando esse vídeo, a única coisa que você vai ter que fazer é só cumprimentar a pessoa do lado. Estamos aqui despedidos para nos organizarmos ali, aqueles que quiserem adquirir o livro. Nós já vamos organizar também o Terry para que você tire uma foto, se desejar, tem ali uma dedicatória. Então, muito obrigado por terem vindo, espero que tenha sido um tempo enriquecedor. Em nome da Batista do Povo, se você é visitante, a gente disse, vem, volta aqui outras vezes, e é muito bom recebê-lo. E se você é da casa, obrigado por nos apoiar e atender o pedido do pastor Ivene para estarmos todos aqui.
My name is David Ashcraft, and I'm the president and CEO of the Global Leadership Network. I'm going to be coming to Brazil in October, and I would love to spend time with you, talking about pastors, talking about what it means to be a pastor and a leader. Having spent over 40 years as a pastor in the United States, I'd love to share with you some of what I've learned in leading churches in the United States, but I'd also love to hear from you and learn from you. So I'm inviting you to come meet with me October, and looking forward to sharing with you, learning from you, and together just moving further ahead, being better at what we do, because what we say at the GLN is when a leader gets better, everyone wins. And when you get better as a leader, your church will win, your community will win, you will be better at telling people about Jesus. So hope to see you in October.
Nessa tela aqui, na próxima tela, se você puder colocar, tem um QR Code, e aí você apontando ali, você tem mais informações. São vagas limitadas, porque não é muito grande, vai ser numa igreja ali, próximo do aeroporto de Guarulhos também. Então, muito obrigado mais uma vez por esse tempo, e fiquem muito à vontade ali para adquirir o livro e ter um tempo com o pastor Terry.